So hey guys, today we're doing a small follow-up on this other video. So this video is simply about negating monster effects in Yu-Gi-Oh! Uh, I put in the description that I missed a few things. So negating continuous monster effects, non-effect monsters, monsters that gain the effect of other monsters, and a few other things. So didn't cover that, and then there's also costs, which we didn't go through. Soft once per turns, and then crap like Mirror Jade, where we have soft once per 2 turns, which is just very odd indeed. But small follow-up and cleanup here, I guess, is what we're going to be doing today. So I guess the first thing that makes sense to start going over is costs. So with costs and how effects work in general, I kind of realize now that I didn't fully cover that. But in general, there are some guiding principles that you can use to understand how effects work. So for costs are essentially things that must be paid for an effect. And costs don't need to be paid, of course, if you are not activating the effect. So I guess we should start by breaking down effects, and then we'll go into costs. So effects, to be able to be activated, certain conditions need to be met even if there is no cost. So for example, a card that says with the effect of destroy all cards your opponent controls, your opponent must control at least a card for this effect to be activatable. If your opponent controls no cards, that you can't really activate this. And this will be really a lot more valuable, I guess, where you might want to activate an effect to pay a cost on purpose to get a card out of your hand. So let's say, for example, I have, let's say, a Orcus here. Let's say we have Orcus Harpor in my hand, and I want to actually activate this one effect I have that discards a thing, I guess. So I guess Snipe Hunter. Maybe we can Snipe Hunter, and then we need to target a card on the field to destroy, to then send Harpor. We don't really care how this effect resolves. We just need to pay the cost to get rid of Harpor so we can use it. So, something like that. Actually, Snipe Hunter's not even the best example for this, but just in general, we would want to maybe do that, but we might not be able to because, our opponent doesn't have a card, so we can't meet the condition to activate whatever card we have. Snipe Hunter not being a good example because it can target your own cards and not just your opponent's cards. But if we had an equivalent to Snipe Hunter, like, I guess, I think it was this. Yeah, Tribe Infecting Virus. But this destroys all monster types on the field with the declared type, so technically this can also declare its own type as well, so not quite helpful here, but yeah. So to summarize, basically, to activate an effect, the effect, well, it must be possible to do whatever it lists on the effect. So if we were to go with, for example, special summoning a monster, we'll just use Moyi as an example. So Moyi's effect states that when you special summon Moyi or normal summon Moyi, you reveal a Sword Soul card or one water monster in your hand, special summon a Sword Soul token. So this effect, to special summon a Sword Soul token, that's going to be our focus here. So if we have, for example, 4 monsters on our field and then we normal summon Moyi, that would put us at 5 monsters, assuming we're not including in the extra monster zone. Just talk about the main monster zones here. Moyi's effect would not be able to activate because there's no room to summon the token, so that's how that goes. And the token essentially just will not be summoned, and Moyi's effect will also not be activated. So another way to look at this is if we were to control one less monster and our opponent for some reason gave us a monster, that would also prevent us from summoning the token. And that's kind of how that goes, I suppose, right? So one rule of the effects in Yu-Gi-Oh is that they try to resolve as much as possible. So for example, if we were to have Nibiru's effect here, so let's assume we have Nibiru, and then we have maybe a summon limit. So this is pretty strange, but summon limit says neither player can summon more than 2 times per turn. So let's assume that I have a Nibiru, and I will summon 1 time on my opponent's turn for whatever reason. So that will put me at 1 summon, and then my opponent here will summon 5 times, and then I will chain 1 Nibiru, and then I will chain 2 to the summon limit. So, or chain 2, the summon limit to the Nibiru. So the chain order resolves backwards, so we'll go chain, resolve, summon limit, and then Nibiru. So in this case, Nibiru is really weird, because technically if we were to have flipped over summon limit earlier, I believe Nibiru is not able to be activated at all, because this would put us at essentially 3 summons, and we can't summon more than 2 times per turn, as we can see here by this effect. So we summon the token and also Nibiru itself, Nibiru the primal being here. So if we were to activate the effect of Nibiru, it will try to resolve as much as possible. So what will end up happening in the resolution is that Nibiru will tribute as many cards as possible, and then it will not be able to summon the token. So it'll just summon itself, it'll tribute everything, summon itself, in specifically it's that order. If it doesn't tribute any cards, I don't think it gets summoned. Right? Yeah. And in this case, we'll just activate the first 2 we'll resolve the first 2 lines of text here essentially, and then we won't be able to resolve this part down here. And that's just how that works, and how effects in general work. So that's kind of how that goes, I guess. So another interesting thing, I guess, that kind of applies to this concept is that if we have DPE here, so let's assume I control a monster and my opponent controls a back row and DPE. What I could technically do is, let's assume my controlled card is Mirror Sword Knight. I mean, it's kind of nonsensical here, but if my opponent does chain 1, Destiny, Hero, Destroyer, Phoenix, Enforcer, and then I go ahead and chain 2 Mirror Sword, well, it wouldn't be Mirror Sword Knight, it would have to be something else. So something that essentially just removes guys off my field, right? So either way, I'm going to, well, let's assume I'm going to remove the guys off my field, and then my opponent is the only one that controls cards, so then they would have to non-target destroy 2 of their own cards with the Destroyer, Phoenix, Enforcer. So they could destroy like DPE plus 1 of their back row here, or both of their back row, and that's kind of how that goes, which is like kind of weird to think about, but that's how it works, because you decide to activate this effect and you can't really choose not to do an effect once you've declared its effect. So that's kind of an important part of Yu-Gi-Oh, I guess, and that's how effects work kind of in general-ish. But yeah, if your opponent does not control a card for you to destroy, you can't use whatever destroy effect. Zeus is kind of weird, in which case I believe you can activate Zeus, I believe, despite there being no cards on the field aside from Zeus. I think it's just an effect that won't do anything, which is weird to think about. But yeah, if your opponent doesn't control any monsters, you can't write Geki. But we'll leave it at that for now. So moving on to costs. Costs are denoted by the semicolon right here. And when an effect starts a chain, there's a colon, which you can see right here. So if you look at this effect, there is no semicolon and no colon. So that's how you can tell this effect to summon does not start a chain, making this an inherent summon. And this effect here, send one dark monster from your deck to the graveyard. So first off, to activate this effect to begin with, we do need a monster in our deck, and we do not need to be able to send it to the graveyard. So if it would be banished instead, that is still fine. And we have here you can discard one dark monster for cost, denoted here. So everything before this point is cost. So there's also the fact that this is just once per turn. So this is what we call soft once per turn. And cards like Moyi will state right here, you can only use each effect of Sword Soul Moyi once per turn. When it name drops the card like this, it means that you can genuinely only use the effect once on any given turn. But when it says once per turn and doesn't list the card, this is essentially saying once per turn per copy, I guess. You can picture it like that, but it's not like exactly 100% accurate. But yeah, that's the general idea. So with Dark Grepher here, we send a guy from our hand. Well, specifically it's discard. So if we want to activate the effect, we have to pay the cost. And if we are unable to pay the cost, we cannot activate the effect at all. And this stuff gets pretty jank. So one quick example to confuse you guys real quick, I suppose, is with Altergeist. If I could spell. So with Altergeist, let's assume we have Protocol with Altergeist Haunted Rock and Altergeist Multifaker. So this is pretty weird, but what we can do here is we can activate Protocol, and they'll just essentially be flipping Protocol face up and doing nothing else with it. That counts as activating Altergeist Protocol, and that counts as a trap having activated just by flipping it over and not using an actual effect. Good enough for Multifaker. And then we can activate the effect to Special Summon Multifaker. But what we can also do is we can activate Altergeist Haunted Rock, which is a really weird card. So this effect here is not a cost. When this card is activated, send one Altergeist monster from your hand to the graveyard. So this is part of an effect, but to even do this, you require essentially an Altergeist monster. So what we can do here is we can kind of cheat this and not pay the kind of cost on the Haunted Rock. So assuming the only Altergeist we have in hand is Multifaker, what we can do here is we flip over the Protocol, and then we chain in this order now, in the new chain, because this is essentially a quick effect. We can activate Haunted Rock as Chainlink 1 in the new chain, and then Chainlink 2 Multifaker. So Multifaker will then special summon itself, leaving us with no Altergeist cards in hand, but this card will still have been activated, and we can now use the other effect, I guess. And yeah, we essentially here just cheat this part where we were supposed to send an Altergeist monster from the hand to the graveyard. We just don't do that. Yeah. So don't confuse that with costs, because costs must absolutely be paid, and costs happen before chain resolution. They happen immediately. So one way to utilize this, I suppose, is sending for cost for something. So we'll go with, for example, enemy controller, I guess. Sure. So if we have, let's say, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. Let's say we have an Imperm and any monster effect activating. So we'll just use the example of, I don't know, Moyi effect again. So we'll go Chainlink 1, Moyi effect. Our opponent does Chainlink 2, Infinite Impermanence. We can use the cost to immediately, before the chain resolves, to send the Moyi to still resolve its effect as Chainlink 1. And we can use this cost to effectively dodge the Infinite Impermanence. But where this gets a little bit trippy is if we have like something like this, we have oops, spelled that wrong. We have Hieratic Seal of the Heavenly Spheres, and then we have DD Crow. So Hieratic Seal of the Heavenly Spheres distributes a monster from either your hand or field as cost. So we can do this, and they'll be able to pay the cost for Hieratic Seal of the Heavenly Spheres. It also has the effect of, if it specifically is distributed, you can special summon a dragon monster from your hand or deck, and then make its attack defense 0. So this effect here really incentivizes you to tribute Hieratic Seal for its own effect. So what we can do here is, if you were to activate Hieratic Seal of the Heavenly Spheres, it sends itself for cost, and this effect here to summon. If this card is tributed, this is actually something that happens in a new chain, as you can tell right here with the colon. So since it sends itself for cost, what we can do is we can activate DD Crow to actually banish the Hieratic Seal of the Heavenly Spheres, so that this effect here doesn't trigger. So that's kind of neat, I guess. And that's a little bit of a utilization of abusing cost and getting abused because your effect is cost, I guess. Kind of depends, but if this floats into Magnuma, this adds a lot of follow-up, I guess. So it's fairly worthwhile to do regardless. But yeah, to break it down simply, costs must absolutely be paid for your effects, and they must be paid exactly as they say. If you cannot pay a cost, you cannot activate an effect. Pretty simple. Kind of. So, for example, let's say Macrocosmos is active and your card says, it sends itself to the graveyard for cost. If nothing can go into the graveyard, that effect is not able to activate because it's not possible to send for cost. So that's kind of how that works. It's kind of the same concept as like an effect fizzling, but it happens before chain resolution, I guess. That's one way to look at it. And this is also why you cannot pay for cost certain effects with pendulum monsters. So cards that say send for cost don't work on pendulum monsters on the field because they do not get sent to the graveyard. Pendulum monsters actually go to the pendulum, or go to the extra deck face up, because they are pendulum monsters, and that's kind of a mechanic. Don't even bother asking me why they get banished instead of getting put to the extra deck face up. Like, genuinely doesn't make sense to me. The ruling, I think, is kind of dumb on this one, but yeah, whatever. Pendulum cards essentially get they just have specific weird kind of rulings because of how they're designed, I guess, and it sets them apart from other cards, I suppose, to an extent. And while we're at it, just going to throw this out there: cards that banish face down specifically cannot banish tokens, but you can in fact banish tokens, just not face down, because they don't have a face down state, I guess. They have like defense position, attack position, but they can't really be face down. In fact, they can be continuous spells or traps as well, like tokens. But you know, face down, token, ridiculous. Anyways, yeah, that's kind of how that goes. I guess a really good example of an effect not being able to resolve because of like a condition is, I guess, Fenrir's effect versus like a really big token. So yeah, Fenrir can't banish tokens because Fenrir only banishes face downs. So yeah, that pretty much explains that, I guess. And then let's see what else we have here. Oh, right. Cards that just can't be negated. I mean, there's, I suppose, technically cards that also just can't be responded to, but that's like a different thing altogether. But yeah. I think I might have covered that, so we're not going to go over that here. So cards that can't be negated, there are actually a few of them, and they just blankly state that they cannot be negated. And technically, it's just really jank. So we just have to go over this, I guess. We have Ultimate Leo Utopia Ray. So this effect specifically says here, let's see, this effect's activation and effect cannot be negated. So if we were to, for example, hit this against Gamma, Gamma doesn't work that well against this, like, at all. So Gamma's effect says, when your opponent activates a monster effect while you control no monsters, quick effect, you can special summon both this card from your hand and one side frame driver from your hand, deck, or graveyard. And if you do, negate that activation. And if you do that, destroy that monster. So if we look at the order for this, first thing we do here, special summon both this card from your hand and one side frame driver from your hand, deck, or graveyard. And then after that happens, you negate the activation of the specific card you're responding to. Then if that happens, you destroy that monster. So Ultimate Leo Utopia Ray does not actually have any protection on it, just like generally speaking. So the reason this won't be destroyed by Gamma and why Gamma will still special summon itself and driver is because effects will still try to resolve as much as possible. So Ultimate Leo Utopia Ray, it cannot, it's a activation, as you can see here, it says cannot be negated. So that's the part of Gamma where it stops, where the negate effect doesn't happen, so it does not destroy. So that's kind of how that works. And also, its effect and activation cannot be negated, so that there's not really a lot you can do about this effect attempting to resolve. Except, I suppose, like, you can fizzle the effect by not having this on the field, so there's nothing to equip to. So there's technically that, which works, but yeah, that's negating. Well, that's not negatable effect, I guess. And of course, this can still be changed to a different effect. Like, for example, discard a card in your opponent's hand. Well, if you know, you know, right? Okay, what now? I think that is pretty much it, right? Soft onces, costs, and then cards that can't be negated. Wait, no, wait, there's two more things missing. Non-effect monsters, so, oh, great. I think I just have to really mention that they're monsters that don't have effects, and there's several classifications for them, unsurprisingly. There are normal monsters, and then there are non-effect monsters, which are different. So, for example, a token is not considered a normal monster. It is considered a non-effect monster, so it's not an effect monster, but it's not a normal monster either. And there's like differentiation between them that matters. So if we have like Tenyi here, all non-effect monsters on the field are unaffected by monster effects. So normal monsters, I guess we can break it down this way, are non-effect monsters, but like a guy like Maka the Tenyi here is not a normal monster, but is a non-effect monster. So guys in the main deck can be normal monsters, guys in the extra deck are just non-effect monsters, I guess, if they don't have an effect. But they are not normal monsters. And certain things that list like normal monsters, like I think Piercing the Darkness probably mentions it. Let's see. Non-token normal monster. Yeah. So if we were to special summon Draco Berserker, it does not count for Piercing the Darkness. But if we were looking at the Tenyi field spell, this does in fact count for Berserker, and Berserker becomes unaffected. So that is pretty much that in a nutshell, and both guys essentially don't have effects. And I guess it does matter for like a card like Unrivaled Denyi. So yeah, that's kind of how that goes, I suppose. But also, last thing, there are also monsters that can gain effects from other monsters. So that's a whole ass different thing. But that wasn't really covered. But we have IP effect here. A link monster that uses this card as material cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. So with this effect specifically, even if a monster is negated, IP Masquerade's effect will still apply, but this doesn't apply in the same way to everything. So if we have, for example, Astral Karibo instead, Astral Karibo as the wording of a number XYZ monster that was summoned using this card on the field as material gains this effect. So the effect of Astral Karibo listed here becomes the effect of the monster that is summoned using Astral Karibo, but in the case of IP Masquerena, this is different. This is not the effect of that monster. This is counted as something separate. So this protection does not work under skill drain. This protection does work under skill drain, essentially, right? And we can also disable the protection with Imperm against Astral Karibo, but we cannot disable IP Masquerena by like imperming whatever we make with IP Masquerena. So that's kind of how this works, I suppose. And then there is also some jank stuff where the effect is also like maybe hard once per turn. So Vendreads also kind of do the same thing as Astral Karibo to an extent, except it's hard once per turn. So if we go to Revenants, we have this effect at the bottom. A Vendread monster ritual summoned using this card on the field gains this effect. You can only use the preceding effects of Vendread Revenants once per turn. So this effect here is soft once per turn. So essentially what all this gobbledygook means is this effect here is soft once per turn, and you can technically use this, I guess, like 5 times per turn if you somehow manage to summon a Vendread monster like 5 times on different turns. Then that would work, I guess. But you can only gain this effect once per turn. This effect here is not actually genuinely once per turn, like not hard once per turn. So we could use this like 5 times if we really wanted to. Would just be like on like turn 10 or 20 or something dumb. But okay. We have that going for us. And then this effect is also going to become that monster's effect. It gains this effect, so it's part of that monster's effect technically now. So for example, if we summon Revendread Executor using this guy as a material, this effect is not considered Revenant's effect, it's considered Executor's own effect, despite it technically not being Executor's effect and technically being the effect of Revenant's. So if we were to, like, I guess use a Black Goat Laughs, Executor would not be able to activate this effect if Executor was declared. So that's jank. And then another one of these kind of rulings, we have like Therions, where we have this. Let's see. A Therion monster equipped with this card gains 700 attack. Also, it can activate the second effect listed above as if it were Therion King Regulus. So this counts in a really weird way where it's not Therion King Regulus that's equipped activating its effect. It's whatever is equipping Therion King Regulus gets to utilize Therion King Regulus's effect, but it still counts as Therion King Regulus using its effect, meaning you can only use this effect once per turn, or hard once per turn, rather. So that's kind of how Therions work, because, you know, wording, jank. And I think that about covers everything I missed. Oh, that still took a while. But yeah, hopefully that was helpful to some of you guys. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.